All right, here we go. Good afternoon. Once again, everyone, great to see so many familiar faces and some new ones here with us today for the EM Advisory Board meeting. My name is Jocelyn Nahigian, and I'm the Director for the Office of Intergovernmental and Stakeholder Programs. And before I turn it over to Kelly to lead and facilitate our time together, I just want to recognize our advisory board team for all of their efforts in coordinating this virtual meeting and all of our advisory board activities in general. You know, there's so much work involved in FACA space to enable this meeting, lots of coordination with each of you. The work that Kelly and Alyssa and others in EM have put into making these meetings come to fruition is really noteworthy. So thank you, Kelly and Alyssa. And with that, let's get started. Kelly, take it away.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Good morning, everyone, or I think for the majority of you, it's good afternoon. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, so it is still morning here. I am your designated federal officer for the EMAB. I also take care of our Environmental Management Site-Specific Advisory Board. Because we have new members here today, I just wanted to give you a brief intro as to who I was. My background is Environmental Management Program in Nevada. I was with the Nevada program for almost 2 decades and then made the jump over to headquarters, and I'm very excited to be involved with the advisory board, and I look forward to working with all of you more and getting to know our new members and work on some exciting new charges that we are going to announce today. So what I would like to do is go around and we'll ask everyone for brief introductions. We have just a couple moments allocated for this. I think we have about 5 minutes for everybody to introduce themselves. So if you could just tell us who you are, where you're from, and if you have a short background that you'd like the board members to know about you, we'll do that too. So Amy, if we could start with you.
Yes, I'm Amy Fitzgerald. I'm calling in from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Glad to see everyone. I am beginning, this is my 2nd term on EMAB, and looking forward to working with all of you as we move ahead and begin a new chapter in EMAB's work for this session.
Thanks, Amy. David?
I'm David Abelson. I live in Colorado. It's finishing up my 2nd term on the EMAB. I've been involved in EM issues as a congressional staffer, local government staffer, and also now as an independent consultant consistently since 1995, excuse me, and also have a lot of experience working with the Office of Legacy Management.
Thanks, David. Jack?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jack Craig. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was a proud DOE employee for 29 years, and I currently work for Atkins. I've been on the EMAB for 3 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. Celeste?
Hi, everybody. My name is Celeste Green, and I'm a former EPA employee, congressional staffer, and academic. I've been at University of Virginia now for 14 years. And I've been researching and writing about environmental justice for over 25 years.
Thank you, Celeste. Diane. All right, it looks like Diane will be joining us later. Kim? Okay, we're going to move on to Fraser.
Yeah, hello. Been on the EMAB since about 2015. Most of my career with Department of Energy and Environmental Restoration, and then the last 5 years on the commercial side with Huntington Ingalls on environmental restoration. Now mostly retired.
Thank you. Tracy.
Hi, I'm Tracy McDaniel. I am the president and principal of TIP Strategies, an economic development strategic planning firm out of Austin, Texas. And I've been on this board for over 3 years now.
Thanks, Tracy. Nicole?
Hey, I'm Nicole Martinez. I'm on the faculty at Clemson University, although I am currently calling from a conference in Spokane. And my expertise is in health physics and radioecology.
Thank you, Nicole. Michael?
Hi, I'm Michael Shapiro. I'm a newbie. It's my first meeting, And I have experience with the Environmental Protection Agency. I was there for 37 years and had experience managing a number of the programs, including Superfund, hazardous waste, and the water programs. So I'm looking forward to this new beginning.
Great, Michael. Thank you. Josiah.
Good morning, everyone. Still morning over here on the Nez Perce Indian Reservation in Idaho. I'm a member of a Nez Perce tribe, and I work for the Nez Perce tribe in the Cultural Resource Program and have been here since the early 90s. And the Nez Perce tribe is one of the affected tribes in the cleanup of the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, and that's primarily where our interests lie, at least as far as my involvement on this work group. But I'm pleased to see everybody's faces, and I'm sorry I can't do video. My bandwidth isn't that great, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Josiah. We're going to go over to Jim.
Hi, Jim Rispoli, did you mean?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Jim Rispoli, a former assistant secretary there for environmental management for the better part of 4 years, but that was a while ago. I left there, retired from DOE in early 2009, but I actually teach environmental compliance courses at NC State University, graduate engineering courses, and have my whole career has been in engineering positions, most of which involved environmental compliance. Civil engineer by education, like Jack Craig over there.
Thank you. And we're going to go to Jake.
Yeah, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. I'm out in San Diego, so still morning for me as well. I'm new to the board, first meeting. I see one familiar face on here, Jim, that would be you. 28-year active duty Navy career with the surface warfare community and the civil engineer corps community. I'm with Jacobs Engineering and have been with them for about 10 years since leaving active duty service. Glad to be on the board and look forward to working with you all.
Thanks, Jake. Now over to Brent.
Hi, how you doing? Sorry for being late. Had a dual push problem. Modern technology at its finest. You know what I mean? Okay, I'm here in City of West Richland. I'm the mayor and CEO. Currently serving my third term. I'm also the chair of Energy Communities Alliance and the administrative chair for Hanford Communities. In my spare time, I've been in small business for approximately 33 years. Married, two daughters, 4 grandchildren. As you can tell from raising 2 daughters, no hair left. This is my first stint on EMAB, and look forward to working with everybody.
Thanks, Brent. Before I go to DOE staff that are on the line, did I miss any EMAB members?
Hi, I'm Diane Howard. I'm the executive director for the Port of Benton here in Richland, Washington. I was former city economic development manager, and I'm actually born and raised in Richland, so I'm a local. And to do economic development in your local community is a great honor and a privilege. So just really appreciate my time on this board and with all of you. I look forward to meeting our new members. I think most relevant to this group that I was part of the last land transfer that the community, Tri-Cities community received in 2015 from the Department of Energy. So asset reuse, planning, economic development, and advocacy with all of our stakeholders is a key issue for me. And then I also do a lot of work on our advanced reactor projects and new energy projects that are coming forward into fruition, ADRP, as well as work in hydrogen, clean energy storage, et cetera. So again, just look forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other EMAB members who still need to introduce themselves? All right. If we're going to switch over now and introduce the Department of Energy employees that are on, I'm going to try and go through the list. It's in no particular order. So if I do miss you at the end, we'll circle back and get anybody that I have missed. I have first on my list, Candace.
Yeah, so I'm Candace. I work for Ike White. I'm the acting principal deputy assistant secretary. I've worked on EM issues for almost 20 years, first as a local elected official in Nevada, and then of course after becoming a Fed. That's it for me.
Thanks, Candace. And next we have Melinda.
Hi, I'm Melinda Comfort. I'm in the general counsel's office at headquarters, and I'm the attorney that's assigned to work on conflict of interest matters for this committee, and I'll be doing the ethics briefing today. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Melinda. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela Watmore, the head of contracting activity and the DAS for acquisition and project management. I hate to date myself, but I wrote some of the original MOUs when we transitioned assets over from DP to EM when EM started. So I'm still around, but I'm a Fed now. So glad to be here.
Thanks, Angela. Kathy?
Hi, I'm Kathy Tullis, and today is my first day as Chief of Staff with the Office of Environmental Management. Thanks for inviting me. I do have 38 years with the department, including work at 2 different field offices and most recently with NNSA. So thank you guys for inviting me to this group.
Thank you. Eric?
Hi, good afternoon. Whoop, let me get my camera going here if I can. Maybe no camera, sorry. Hi, I'm Eric Olds. I'm the Director of Communications for the Office of Environmental Management, a fairly recent transplant to Washington, D.C. myself. Prior to that, I was at the Hanford site and I actually lived in West Richland. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Jay?
Good afternoon and morning, everyone. I'm Jay Mullis. For many, many years, I was here in Oak Ridge, and I'm physically still here, Amy, so it looks like we're fixing to get a bad storm out my window. But you know, for Halloween last year, Ike gave me a good present and let me come to headquarters as the acting EM4 to replace Mark Gilbertson. That was the day after my birthday. And by the way, Brent, I'm looking at myself on the screen here, and I notice my forehead's getting high. I've only got one daughter, but now it makes all the sense in the world. So, good to see all y'all today.
Thanks, Jay. John Howard.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Howard. I'm the Acting Deputy Chief of Staff here in Environmental Management. I work for Ms. Kathy in supporting Ms. Candace and Ike. I've been at DOE since November of 2009. I got here just after Mr. Rispoli left, and it's a real pleasure to be here today.
Thanks, John. Kristen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kristen Ellis, and I'm currently the Acting Director of the Regulatory Intergovernmental and Stakeholder Engagement Office. So that includes Jocelyn and Kelly. I also previously had Kelly's role as the Deputy or Designated Federal Officer for EMAB. So it's nice to be back and see everyone again on this board. So thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm going to take just a brief moment to cut in on something else. Alyssa or Chuck, if you could help Julie Dock, she's having trouble logging into the meeting. If you could reach out to her and help her, that would be wonderful. And going back to introductions, Mary.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Kruger. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Resource Management here in EM. And I started my federal career at EPA working on EM issues back with the WIP certification. And in between, I was at Homeland Security for a number of years. So it's great to see you guys. Thanks to the old and new members. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Mary. I did purposely skip over our leader because I will be doing a formal introduction for him later, but we do have Mr. Ike White with us. Ike, did you want to say anything now before your portion? We still have to do our oath for the new members.
I'll just wait, Kelly, until I do comments later, if that's okay. Thanks.
Absolutely. Just didn't want to skip over you. All right. Well, Alyssa and Chuck are helping Julie Dock get on. She is the one who's going to be administering the oath for our members. So I'm trying to see if she is on yet. And oh, I do see her name. Julie, are you there?
I am here.
Wonderful. We are now at the part of the agenda where it is your turn to administer the oath for our new members.
Okay. All right. New members.
Get my oath up here. Each raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Jake Washington,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies,
foreign and
domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office I'm about to enter, so help me God.
Okay. All right. Okay, got you all sworn in.
Thank you, Julie. Is there
And,
anything else that you need to do with our new members?
I think Angelica was going to get with them on their documentation so we could get them into E-Verify.
Okay. We will help them make that connection. Thanks, Julie, for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I would like to now take a couple moments to introduce Mr. Ike White. Ike is the Senior Advisor for the Office of Environmental Management. Prior to being appointed in this capacity in November 2021, he served as the Acting Assistant Secretary for EM from January 2021 to November 2021, and as Senior Advisor to the Undersecretary for Science, overseeing the Office of Environmental Management from June 2019 to January 2021. Mr. White provides leadership for the safe cleanup of the environmental legacy brought about from 5 decades of nuclear weapons development and government-sponsored nuclear energy research. Over to you, Ike.
Thanks, Kelly, and good morning, or depending on where you are, good afternoon to all of you joining us as part of our EM Advisory Board meeting today. Really appreciate the service from everyone on the video call today. And the oath of office is a reminder of why it is that all of us do what we do. As the person responsible for the world's largest environmental cleanup program, responsible for addressing the legacy of decades of nuclear weapons work and nuclear energy research, I'm certainly very heartened by the extraordinarily diverse set of talent represented by the advisory board we have with us here today. So I really do want to thank all of you for your continuing commitment to public service. I know many of you have been in public service or continue to be in public service now. A few of you come from private industry, but in any case, all of you are committed to public service as part of this effort, and I want to thank you for that. I want to thank and recognize a couple of folks specifically. First of all, welcome to our new members. I look forward at some point over the next year or so, hopefully, to meeting you in person as we conduct future advisory board meetings. Brent Gary, Celeste Green, Mike Shapiro, and Jake Washington. Also want to thank our leadership for the EMAB. I appreciate Shelley Wilson agreeing to step up as chair of the EMAB, and Amy Fitzgerald for being the vice chair. The representative leadership experience of these two is extraordinary. They both have, I won't say exactly how long, but significant experience as state and local officials who are representing the communities that are why we do what we do in the environmental cleanup program. So I really appreciate the opportunity to continue working with both of you in this role as part of our EMAB. Also want to thank Jack Craig for his recent leadership effort, and also thanks to Jack for his decades of experience supporting the environmental management program, both as a federal employee and working for one of the companies that does cleanup work for us now. Also want to take a second to thank one of the folks who won't be continuing with us on the board, Elliot Laws. I don't believe Elliot is with us today, but certainly want to recognize his service as part of the EM Advisory Board over the years. Again, I really do appreciate the work that all of you have committed to do. I know it's not because of the salary that we're paying all of you. I know it's because of your commitment to public service, and because you're passionate about the program just as I am, and really want to recognize that and really want to thank you for being willing to spend your personal time helping make the cleanup program a better program and helping us do what it is that we do and support the communities around the country as part of the very vital mission that we have. Before I talk about the new charges that I wanted to ask for support from all of you, I want to take just a second to kind of talk about where we are with the cleanup program, and maybe that will lead into why I think some of these charges are so important. First of all, with the year about halfway over, I think we've made fairly extraordinary progress this year with getting ahead of some of our key priorities that we set out to do at the beginning of the year. I was recently out at Portsmouth, where we've just completed the demolition of building 326. That's something that we were able to get done sooner than we had planned, which is great, and also able to get it done safely, which is just as important. So really appreciate the work from the folks out there in making that happen. Continuing to make D&D progress across the country and other places in West Valley. Still on track this fall to begin the main plant process demolition. Had a chance to talk to those folks earlier this summer as we're wrapping up our deactivation work. Savannah River, we're treating record amounts of tank waste there. It's nice at Savannah River to have all of our infrastructure in place and to be able to deal with the environmental legacy of the reprocessing activities that occurred there over decades. Certainly look forward to continuing to ramp up that treatment activity at Savannah River, and also begin to process transuranic waste there as well as part of the EM mission and as part of the NNSA mission. At Hanford, we actually achieved a fairly significant milestone over the course of the past year in getting the taint side cesium removal system up and running. I had a chance to visit just a few months ago. It's really nice to see us treating tank waste at Hanford on an industrial scale, several 100,000 gallons of tank waste at this point treated at Hanford, getting ready for vitrification in the direct feed low activity waste facility when that's up and running by the end of next year. Also continuing to do D&D work at Hanford. A lot of folks see Hanford and think about the enormity of the tank waste challenge, but certainly there's a lot of cleanup work other than tank waste to be done at Hanford. It's very pleased to see progress there, particularly with the reactor complexes along the Columbia River, with the cesium strontium capsules we're moving into dry storage, and building 324, one of the facilities we're cleaning up along the Columbia River. Idaho continuing to make progress. I was just there several months ago, celebrating with the governor and the attorney general the fact that we got done with our transuranic retrieval effort 18 months ahead of our planned schedule, a fairly significant effort in terms of protecting the Snake River Plain aquifer. Also on track there to get done with, or at least begin the treatment work associated with integrated waste treatment unit. We've been about 7 weeks into our latest simulant run and treated about 100,000 gallons of simulant so far as this part of this run. So the work with that facility is looking pretty good for this year. As we focus on getting all of those activities done and continuing to clear the decks across the country and make progress, though, it is important to think about some of the challenges that we have left. And it's several sites, Hanford, for example, dealing with tank waste. We have decades to go. And as I think about what it is that underlies making sure that we are successful in that environment, the thing that I think matters more than just about anything else is people. Certainly, it's important that we continue to strengthen our relationships with regulators and stakeholders. It's important that we deal with some of the challenges of things like tank waste at Savannah River. It's important that we enhance our R&D efforts and take advantage of opportunities to get some of our work done faster or better as we move forward. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the very end. But none of this happens if we don't have the right people on both the federal and with the companies that do the cleanup work across the country. So I really wanted to chat with you a little bit today, and I'll try to keep my remarks brief so I can take questions at the end if you would like. But I certainly want to lay out for you what I see as one of our more significant challenges, and think about how we might do a better job of recruitment, retention, and setting up the work environment of the future to really get the workforce that we need to work on some of the more complicated, difficult challenges that we have in this country. I'll focus on some numbers with the federal workforce for just a second. As you go from company to company at different sites to do the cleanup program, I think you'll see things that are similar. but I just happen to have data at hand on the federal workforce, so I'll talk about that a little bit right now. We have just under 1,200 employees. We have a staffing ceiling that's a little over 1,400. Hiring as fast as we can. It is really hard for us to close this gap due to a number of factors, including sort of rising attrition rates and increased difficulties in hiring in the current hiring environment. Of the workforce that we do have on board, about a fourth of those on the federal side are eligible to retire today. About a third of the folks that we have in the cleanup program will be eligible to retire within 3 years. And about half of the folks in EM will be eligible to retire in 5 years. One of the more interesting pieces of data, if you look at all of the federal employees, all 1,200 folks that we just mentioned, of those 1,200 folks, only about 15 are currently under the age of 30. One of those folks, I think, is on the call today. And I hear similar sentiments from the companies that do work for us. One of the things when I visit sites, I tend to take time out and meet with all of the heads of the various companies that do work for us at that site. Want to hear and get their perspective on the things they see as significant risks, challenges, or where they need help from the government. One of the things that I've heard recently from almost all of them is concerns in the area of recruiting and retaining the workforce they need in order to be successful going into the future. The good news is that I think we've been successful at working with OMB and with Congress to get additional resources that are really important to helping us be successful in doing this. Just this past year, we asked for, and Congress was willing to grant us an additional $50 million for a total of $56 million to support our work with minority serving institutions across the country. I think this is a very important tool that we have for workforce pipeline development for both the federal workforce and for our contractors across the country. We've certainly begun using that over the past few months. You've probably seen news clips on grants that have gone out or are going out at different places across the country as we work to leverage those funds to create those workforce pipelines from Washington State to South Carolina to Tennessee and places in between. I think we have opportunities, though, to grow beyond just this effort and think more broadly about ideas for workforce recruitment and retention. At West Management Symposium this past spring, I met with the Energy Communities Alliance. One of the things we talked about was how to share lessons learned and best practices across the entire EM complex. So this fall, when we have the nuclear cleanup workshop, Kristen is leading an effort working with ECA and with FCOG, our contractor group that supports our activities, to host a workshop as part of that cleanup workshop to really focus on what we're doing across the country and share ideas for how we do better in terms of workforce retention and workforce recruitment going forward. It's something that I've specifically asked FCOG to look at as well. I've met with them a couple of times over the past few weeks, looking at ideas from the companies in terms of how we do a better job on the federal side. But I think this is one area where all of you can put your collective expertise together and think about ideas and help me think outside the box in terms of how we could do even better. How can we increase our participation in STEM partnerships to help prepare students for a career on the environmental management side? At what point should the EM program be trying to drive students towards STEM? What innovative recruitment practices could we adopt for the federal workforce and for our contractor partners that align with our efforts to build a diverse and inclusive workforce, both on the federal side and with our contractors? How do we recruit professionals and students for non-STEM positions? HR, budget, project management, communications, crafts, apprentices. What sort of retention practices are we seeing that are attractive in today's environment and have the greatest impact for federal employees and for contractors? What kind of adjustments can we make in our contractor human resources policies that enable the companies that work with us to be more successful in their efforts to do workforce recruitment and retention? And are there programmatic opportunities like the one that we're leveraging with the minority serving institutions that would also be beneficial to us in terms of developing the workforce pipeline that we and the companies that work with the cleanup program need in the future? So really, it's kind of a wide open charge. I appreciate that. I think all of you collectively, we have experience here from academia, from the companies that do work with cleanup program, from communities that are involved in driving the educational systems that support our sites across the country. And so I think we have a fairly broad and diverse set of expertise that covers the wide spectrum of what it means to develop the workforce pipelines that we need. So I really appreciate being able to utilize all of this talent to help us come up with new ideas to sort of look at this problem from different perspectives as we move forward. Also want to think about what work looks like for a lot of folks in a post-COVID environment. I know many of you have probably seen the same news articles I have as companies across the country struggle to think about what it means to bring employees back to work, particularly office workers in a post-COVID environment. On the federal side, we're certainly struggling with this at the moment. I personally think that there is a lot of benefit to be gained from in-person collaboration and communication. I spent most of my career doing this. I think being able to build relationships and communicate is just something inherently important about the ability to meet face-to-face from time to time that helps build those relationships and build those networks and build that communication. But I don't think that we're going to go back to exactly like we used to be prior to 3 years ago. I think there's also an opportunity, and I think we've seen this over the last few years, for folks to actually be more productive for certain aspects of the workflow that we're asking them to do. When they're working from home versus working in the office, there are fewer distractions, you can focus. There's a lot of work products that folks generate that I think we've actually seen productivity go up in a work from home environment, at least in the short term. So as we think about how to meld the best of both of these worlds, one of the things I've asked all of our office directors in EM to do is to work over the next few months to develop office-specific plans for how we would change and think about our workflow in light of a post-COVID work environment that allows the folks who work in the organization to have maximum flexibility that I think folks have grown to appreciate, but also continues to allow us to develop the relationships and the communication skills and the networking that we need in order to really be successful with the program that we're trying to accomplish as well. So I would really appreciate, all of you have different perspectives in this regard. Again, working for companies, working for academia, working for some of the state and local governments that are in cleanup sites around our country. I think, all of you have very different perspectives on this, I'm sure. But I would appreciate the benefit of your expertise as you think about what that looks like for the cleanup program going forward. How can we leverage hybrid and virtual flexibilities to get the best of both worlds? How can we empower folks? What do our workspaces need to look like? How do we balance mission needs with what employees expect in an area where recruitment in particular is a lot more challenging than it has historically been? As we adapt a different work environment for the future, how do we make sure that we continue to foster the diverse and inclusive workplace that we want to have in the cleanup program? So again, I really appreciate all of you thinking about this going forward. As I struggled with this myself over the course of the past year, one of the things that I found somewhat encouraging is that as I watched the news articles and the occasional tweets from some of our country's finest Fortune 500 executives, the one piece of solace I have is that they all seem about as certain as I am in terms of exactly what this needs to look like going forward. I think I saw a quote from Tim Cook recently that just sort of pointed out that he's tried a couple things and backtracked on a couple of things, and at this point, it's just all going to have to evolve going forward. So I appreciate the fact that we're all in good company, but this is one really important component, I believe, of making sure that at some point we get the workforce that we really need in order to be successful in the cleanup program. All those challenges I talked about earlier, all of the work that all of you know that we have to do across the country over the next few decades, none of it happens without the right people. And getting the right people on board is probably the single most important thing that we can do to ensure the success of the program in the future. So I really appreciate your advice in that regard. Also, would appreciate your thoughts in terms of a potential future charge. Nothing from this meeting, but maybe the next time we meet, one of the things that might be an interesting discussion would be whether you all think that it's time to update some work that the EMAB did for the program back in the 2014 timeframe, looking at least in part about what the research and development program for the cleanup program needs to be going forward. For those of you who really followed the details of the program closely, you probably noted that I had a hearing this past week with the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee on R&D and the cleanup program. Over the course of the past couple of years, you've probably seen reports from GAO and from the national academies pointing out that the cleanup program could benefit from a greater investment and more focused investment on R&D. At the moment, I've asked our folks who lead the R&D program at the headquarters to rethink how we do program management for R&D in EM. And so one of the things that it would be worth talking to all of you about the next time we meet in person, and for you to think about over the course of the next few months, is whether a specific charge related to how we do R&D might be something that all of you would be interested in. I certainly think I could benefit from the collective experience from all of you on this and other subjects. Also appreciate all the work that all of you, or many of you, have done for the cleanup program in the past. Certainly appreciate the input we've received on our regulatory relationships. I think there's a number of things that we've got in motion that come in part from those recommendations. Certainly appreciate the past efforts in terms of workforce. I know one of the things we're building right now on the acquisition side, which is support the cleanup program, is an acquisition core that we found to be very successful in terms of being able to streamline and improve our acquisition processes across the country. And that in part came from a report from the EMAB back in 2019. So I really do appreciate the advice that we get from all of you. I appreciate the time that all of you are willing to spend working with the cleanup program. I know that, given your backgrounds that you've talked about, and I've seen the more detailed bios for most of you, certainly I know that all of you are just as passionate as I am about the cleanup program and want the program to be successful. So I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to spend time to help make that happen. And so with that, I promised I would keep my remarks brief. Kelly, I don't know if I was successful or not. When I get started, I can tend to go on about things that I'm passionate about. But I did want to leave a little bit of time here at the end to take questions if anyone has any questions.
All right, you can either jump in if you have a question, or you can use the raise your hand feature, whichever you're most comfortable with. Does anybody have any questions? Jim.
Yes, I thank you for that great recap. It was very helpful. And it's always good to hear from you and kind of the way you cover the waterfront, so to speak, and cross over the issues. I more have a question for you. I recall when I first came to EM in 2005, actually, there was no accession program from any university, let alone historically Black and minority universities and institutions. And there was no career development program that provided a career ladder. So we created both. I can recall, I think we hit a high point one year while I was there of like 15 accessions from minority serving universities. But we also had a career development program modeled almost exactly after NAVFAC, where they would come in at either a 5 or a 7, depending upon education level and attainment, and then automatically advance, I think, to 11, and then from then on compete. So most young people in college, they don't think, oh my goodness, I'm going to go to work for DOE Environmental Management. That's where I can do the most good. They probably haven't even heard of us. And my question is, why is it that along the way, those programs get discarded and then have to be resurrected? I don't understand why things that are almost as good as foundational as bread and butter would be done away with when they were proving their worth.
Jim, that is a very good question. And I wish I knew the answer to that question in terms of why those things tend to get disregarded. I suspect it's a combination of priorities and budget, but just the things that you're describing are things that we are in process of restarting right now, right? And so, why they were lost over time, I don't necessarily have the history for that. I suspect a number of different factors come into play. But certainly when you think about a program like EM that we all know is going to be here for 6 decades, right? I mean, there's different parts of the program at different sites where the cleanup program is going to run out that long. And when you think about that and you're going to need the workforce that goes out that far, then it would be irresponsible not to have an entry-level workforce pipeline that really you plan to use to feed that program. So, I certainly think that's something that would help me if, as you guys look at this question of workforce attraction and retention, also think about what helps make programs stable in the long run. That might be a useful thing. I mean, certainly, some of the things that you pointed out are things that we're already working on. The MSI funding that we just got from Congress, for example, we're using to drive curriculum development and postdoc programs and things that help identify to the students at those schools what it's like to work in the cleanup program. So we're trying to make the program more visible to students who work at those schools. We have a different program on the federal side looking at how to pull our internships together and connect that with the accepted service hiring authorities that we already have. Also think about, for example, whether it's worthwhile for the cleanup program to go out and ask for a broader set of accepted service hiring authorities that might be easier to connect to entry-level programs. Some aspects of what we've done in the past, we're continuing to do. We certainly continue to work with Florida International University, and a number of great students come out of that program. We're continuing to work with those folks, and students coming out of that program go into both the contractor side and the federal side. So that's a good question. I wish I knew the answer to it. And certainly I think that's something worth looking at as we think about what programs ought to look like in the future, why the ones we've had in the past didn't stick around.
Thank you.
Candace had a comment that she put in the chat. It says, there was a government-wide revamping of those recent grad programs that led to the dismantling of what existed at the time. Candace, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just in case you do want the history, veterans preference had not been being applied the way it was supposed to. And so they had a government-wide kind of like stop doing these until we can revamp it and make sure veterans preference is being applied. Now, why it wasn't resurrected more quickly after we got the authorities back, I can't answer that. But that is why between your time, Mr. Rispoli, and Ike's, there was a decline in the use of that.
Unfortunate.
I'd like to chime in here and just say that I really appreciated those programs. That's how I became a federal employee, was with one of the college education programs that was in existence in early 2000. So it retained me for sure. I'm still here. All right, is there any?
I can
Go ahead,
recall
Jim.
walking the halls when I would visit later and people would stop me when I was no longer in government, and they would stop me and say, I'm here because of those programs, Kelly, just like you. And, it made you feel good to know that you were affecting people's lives in a positive way and giving them a career. So I hope you all are successful, Ike, in bringing that back, or bringing back some form of it, along with a career development ladder too, which, is a great attraction for people to know that they are guaranteed promotions without competition through GS11 or whatever you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly one person who's also benefited from those programs. I won't say how many decades ago it was that I started out as a federal intern, but it was certainly as part of one of those programs.
Do we have any additional questions?
Yeah, I would throw something out there. I'm hesitant as a newcomer, but I wanted to ask, you mentioned the 1,400 FTE or positions you have, of which I think you said 1,200 were filled. And I'm just curious of that 200 in terms of, I don't know, headquarters functions versus field functions, is if there's any overlap between work you outsource and work you have to do inherently governmental, so that there was no redundancy there. You know what I mean? If you're trying to, everyone's kind of fighting for the same talent, whether it's commercial sector or business sector, and if there's any overlap between those functions and trying to do something so that you would lessen your burden in terms of what you had to fill in-house. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah, no, and that is actually something that we constantly struggle with and think about. The 200 positions that were open are split between headquarters and the field. I think most of them are actually out in the field. Some of them are inherently governmental. There are things, certainly contracting officers, some of our acquisition specialists, some of the folks who do safety, security, regulatory work, some of the folks who do some of the low-level waste disposal work. Those federal project directors, those types of positions tend to be inherently federal, but there are some of them that we can use support service contract work for, and we've tried to expand our efforts in that regard. And it is an absolutely awful time to be trying to close a 200-person gap, right? I mean, just the macroeconomic environment at the moment is pretty hard to hire into. And so the good news is, when I look at attrition rates at least for the federal workforce, our attrition rates are not particularly bad. They're a little higher than maybe what they've historically been, but I think they're within the realm of what we should expect to see from time to time. So that part of the equation is not too bad, but the what we're trying to hire into in terms of the availability of some of the critical skills that we're looking for, as you pointed out, there's just a lot of competition out there right now, and a lot of overlap. So
thank you.
Additional questions?
Kelly, can I make a comment?
Of course.
I think just when I first started in the government, I had to fight my way in. It took me a long time to get hired, and everybody wanted to work for the government. Now it seems like we're doing everything we can to go after people to want to work for the government. Our workforce, and Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're about 10% federal and 90% contractor for the total workforce. But we need the feds to manage the contractors. And on the career ladder question, we absolutely need that. Like a lot of agencies, we're very overgraded, but at a time when we're gapping so many positions, a challenge is, is it better to bring in higher graded, experienced SMEs or, the career ladder that we're eventually going to need? So that's something that we would love to have your advice on. It's kind of how to balance that. Because when you bring in junior staff, you have to have people to train them and mentor them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, this is David. One other challenge you have, I know you have this in New Mexico, I don't know of other sites, is the challenge of the careers of EM versus NNSA. And obviously that's a real issue on both the federal and the contractor side.
yeah, it's at New Mexico, in South Carolina, and Tennessee, a little bit in Washington State. There's overlap between the cleanup program and either the Office of Science or NNSA, looking for the same skills. And for EM, a couple of our large sites like Hanford and Savannah River, we also the system we have has a number of different companies working together at the site to do the cleanup work. We're essentially competing for some of the same talent as well, which makes the competitive environment a little bit more challenging. I will say that at some sites, and I think Savannah River is actually a really good example of this, and Los Alamos is as well, where we've actually, the upside and downside. The upside, I think, is that when we work together, we can actually leverage each other's resources and efforts to work together to create some of the workforce pipelines that are really important to all of us collectively. And I think you see examples of that at South Carolina in terms of some of the work with USC Aiken, local community colleges, and some of the schools in the area. I think we've seen this even at Los Alamos, where the Triad and the M3B folks work together on creating educational pipelines for rad techs, for example. So one of the things that maybe opportunities that you all might take a look at is, how can we turn something that might at first glance appear to be a problem and get as much benefit out of it as possible in terms of being able to leverage collective efforts to do some of the workforce recruitment and development that we're thinking about, at least in terms of pipeline development.
I wanted to add on, echo what Mary said about having people in place to be able to train new people. I know that has been a huge challenge that we've had when you have folks that have all the expertise and the institutional knowledge. They leave the organization, and we've had several instances where, the folks, whether they'll be in contracts, the real estate office, or, personnel, that people have left, and you've got one or two people trying to do just an enormous amount of work. And they get stressed out. And so I think one of the things we need to take a look at, and I certainly appreciate what Angela said. I'm looking forward to getting to know her a little better, but you've got to have people that, whether it's continuing to work on a contract basis or, their willingness to do that. So it's not just, looking at recruiting, but also looking at retaining people, even if it's part-time. If they decide to retire, we've got to be able to figure out a way to help train the new folks coming in so that they want to be able to work for the organization. So.
No, that is a really good point. I mean, when I was an intern, I won't say where, but if you guys look at my bio, you can probably figure out where. It was at the very beginning of the agencies had just been created, and they were hiring a lot of entry-level folks all at once, and didn't have a whole lot of senior folks on board to mentor us with, right? And that created a lot of challenges because it is really important to have the right level of mentorship and training for new folks when you bring them on board in order to really get them to connect with the organization and want to stay. Because if you don't, it's hard to make that happen. And I think that becomes even harder. One of the reasons for taking a look at how we work in a hybrid work environment is I think the whole remote work thing makes that even harder, right? It just sort of adds one level of complication to that, where that sort of building of relationships and communication and mentoring that goes into what you were talking about just becomes exponentially harder when it's being done remotely as opposed to being done in person. Or at least that's my perhaps biased perception. And so maybe you guys can offer me ideas on how to make that not the case necessarily. I certainly think we've seen some workarounds. For example, one of the things that we figured out how to do a little bit in the pandemic was to expand the available pool of talent of senior people who could mentor junior people. So, historically, when folks would come into an office, that sort of mentoring was about the folks in their immediate office space, the folks who worked around them. But as all of us were working in a virtual work environment, one of the things that a number of our offices did was begin to make better use of leveraging all the talent we have out in the field to connect some of the new folks that we have in one place with all of the senior talent that we have across the entire complex, as opposed to just the folks who might have been in their immediate work area. So that was a little bit of an expanded opportunity. It's harder to do it that way, and certainly the communications and the relationships aren't quite the same, but there was an expanded pool of talent available to do that with that I think was helpful.
Any other questions? We will have time later on during our agenda to discuss these charges further, but I wanted to make sure that if anybody had questions for Mr. White, we had that opportunity now. Ike, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Do you have a time frame for when you are looking for draft recommendations?
I would actually prefer to get input from the board on how long they think it should take. Certainly for us, the sooner the better. But I think it's also important that the members of the board have time to really think about this and put the level of thought they think is appropriate into it. So maybe one of the things you all can discuss this afternoon is that question in terms of what you think a realistic timeline is.
Great. Thank you very much for your time, Mike.
All right, thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda, before we go into board business and have more time to discuss these charges, is our ethics briefing from Melinda Comfort, who is with the Office of the Assistant General Counsel. Melinda, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule today to offer the ethics training to our EMAB members. And Chuck will be pulling up your slides for you. Perfect.
Okay, great. I can see my presentation is up. So again, thanks for inviting me. My contact information is on that first slide. And as always, you're encouraged to use it. And I do want to say in advance to returning members, this is the same presentation. The ethics rules and laws don't change from year to year, but it is super important that every year you do get this briefing. It is an important aspect of protecting the integrity of this committee's work so that it's not under question. So next slide. You are having this briefing if you are a special government employee. I'm not sure if there are any representative members, but if there are some on, they're certainly welcome to listen in. But the federal ethics rules apply to SGEs just the same as they do to me and Kelly as full-time feds. However, for representative members, the department, the secretary that is asked that as a matter of policy, you do abide by certain of the conflict of interest provisions. But keep in mind, if you're an SGE, They apply as a matter of law. Next slide. These are the 14 principles of ethical conduct that gave rise to a lot of the ethics provisions that I'm briefly going to discuss. And I don't go over all of them, but I always point out that the first one, public service is a public trust, and your loyalty is to the Constitution above your private gain. If you just remember that and let that be the way you conduct yourself on the committee, you should never really make a wrong choice. But you're welcome at some point, I mentioned, to read those 14 principles. Next slide. So again, this just is a bullet form of a previous slide. Just remember, public service is a public trust. You should not have conflicting financial interests, and even just the appearance of impropriety can just be bad, just as bad as an actual violation of any rule. Next slide. So this is no change. This is what I'm going to talk about: financial conflicts of interest, relationship conflicts, representation restrictions, misuse of position, gifts. Let's start. Next slide. So this is the big one, federal criminal statute that says you should not participate in a particular matter while you're on the committee that has a direct and predictable effect on your financial interests are those whose interests who are imputed to you. Next slide. And these are the persons whose interests are imputed to you. That means they're just the same as if they were your interests, your spouse, minor children, anybody you're in business with, that you work for. And the last bullet, sometimes people don't realize, if you are negotiating for employment, that means you're job interviewing. Anytime you're job interviewing, you're having a two-way conversation. You have a financial interest in that company you're job interviewing with, and you can't participate in a committee matter that will affect that entity. So what does all this mean about avoiding a financial conflict of interest? To break down these two slides, it basically means if you have a financial interest in something, like if you have stock in BP, Exxon, or an environmental management company, you shouldn't work on any committee matter that would affect that financial interest, unless some sort of exception or mitigation strategy is in place. Next slide. And so when we talk about what you can't participate in, when we say you can't participate in a particular matter, we're talking about specific party matters like a contract, a grant, litigation, but we're not talking about something that's super broad, like if you were talking about a policy that would apply to every woman, child, and person in the United States, that might be too broad. But if you can identify who it's going to affect, like if you're working on a policy that would affect certain environmental contractors, that might be something that you shouldn't participate in if you have a financial interest that could be affected by that policy. But super broad stuff, like a lot of the stuff that Ike might have talked about might not be particular matters, but that's to be determined. But if it's super broad, you don't have to worry about it. Next slide. So that was a federal criminal statute that says you should not participate in matters that are going to affect your financial interests. Sometimes it's not your finances, but it's your relationships that you have with different persons or entities that might be of concern. There's a regulation, not a federal criminal statute, but still important. There's a regulation that says you shouldn't work on something, a particular, a matter that involves specific parties, like a contract, a grant, a financial award. You shouldn't work on something like that if you have what we call a covered relationship. And a covered relationship is really like a close relationship. So, and you have a covered relationship with your spouse's employer, your dependent child's employer, members of your household or close relatives, somebody you worked for in the previous 12 months, people you have a business relationship with, organizations you actively participate in, and that can sometimes mean unpaid advisory service. are somebody you're trying to do business with. So what does that mean? That means, for instance, if your sister is the vice president of an environmental management company, you don't have a financial interest in that company, but because of your close relationship with your sister, who is with that environmental management company, you can understand people might question your impartiality if you participated in matters where her employer is involved. So again, it's a regulation. It's not a criminal statute, but it's still important to avoid participating in matters where you have a close or covered relationship with, because again, that goes to protecting the integrity of a committee's work. Next slide. So conflict, if you think you have a conflict of interest, what should you do? First of all, you just step back. You need to inform Kelly, the committee management folks, and seek ethics advice. Sometimes there's a strategy that we can put in place. I believe for some members, we might have had a recusal plan in place to address a conflict. But first, you need to seek ethics advice to determine, in fact, there really is a conflict and if there is, what we can do about it. For instance, if it's a stock interest that causes the conflict, as long as your stock is below $15,000 or less, it's considered de minimis, and you can usually continue to work on the matter. Or if say you're from a university and it's your university employment that causes the conflict, you can usually continue to work on something that affects your employer if you don't have stock in your employer, as long as the matter doesn't affect your employer too specifically or uniquely. So if you're working on something, if you're from a university and you're working on something that's going to affect all universities, the fact that you're from University of Virginia is okay, as long as the matter doesn't affect University of Virginia uniquely or specifically. Next slide. This is just a reminder of the annual requirement to do the financial disclosure form. And I know you all just recently submitted them, and I just got finished doing a review of most of them, all of them. And I want to just thank you for that. I know it's more stuff being put on your plate, and I've seen your biographies. I know how busy all of you are, but it is so important that you do this because it's our tool to help protect the integrity of the committee's work. So in case anybody calls into question that so-and-so shouldn't have worked on X because we think they have a conflict, it's easy for Kelly and myself to go to your financial disclosure statement and see maybe you really didn't have a conflict, and maybe we looked at it and we resolved it. But keep in mind, it is only a snapshot of how your situation is the day you fill it out. As things change in your life after you do that financial disclosure form, just keep in mind that if something happens, you get a new job, or someone close to you gets a new job, if something can be affected by committee work that wasn't reported on your financial disclosure form, you need to make sure you bring that forward if you need to. Next slide. Representation restrictions. There's federal criminal statutes that say you shouldn't represent another entity before the federal government, because you're a federal, you're supposed to be on the side of the federal government, and so you're not representing somebody else while you're on that committee. As an SGE, you're not here to represent somebody else's viewpoints on the committee. For me, as a full-time Fed, I can't represent anybody on anything. So if my neighbor next door has a Social Security problem, and I know all about Social Security matters, I can't represent him before the Social Security Commission because I'm a federal employee. For you as a FACA member, your representation restrictions are a little more limited. You cannot represent entities about things that involve the EMAB. So if you need to represent somebody about something, make appearances and communications before the federal government about something that doesn't concern EMAB, you're free to do that. So for instance, if you're working on a National Science Foundation grant or something, making appearances and communications back to NSF is okay, as long as it doesn't involve your committee work. Next slide. Misuse of position, just really briefly, there's ethics rules that say you shouldn't use your committee status to further your personal private gain. Obviously, you know, you're on the committee, it can be on your resume, it can be on your CV, whatnot. But the idea is you're not using that position to try to get jobs and to further your own personal financial interests. And the second bullet is just a reminder that, you know, you will come into contact with public information, non-public information, and you shouldn't disclose it. Next slide. Just a reminder about gifts. As a SGE, the gift rules apply to you, and a gift, keep in mind, can be anything of value, not just tangible items, but invitations to parties, social events, etc. Anything that we can place a value on it is a gift, and you don't accept gifts if they're offered because of your SGE position. Next slide. So again, I set the rules. You don't accept gifts if they're offered because of your official position, and you also cannot accept or solicit gifts from what we call prohibited sources. And that's anybody who does business with the department, anybody who's trying to do business with the department, or anybody who has interests that are affected by our work. So when we talk about people who do business with the department, that includes our M&O contractors that, you know, at all of our laboratories and other places. So we don't accept gifts from them unless an exception applies. And there's a number of exceptions, and I've just listed a few to keep in mind. If a gift is totally related to your outside personal or business activities, it can probably be okay. And just if it's a very low level gift, $20 or less, and you don't accept more than $50 in a year from that source, it can be okay.
Hi, this is Kathy.
I'll keep going, but keep in mind that even a low level gift, sometimes you should always think about the appearance. Who's it from? If it's, you know, from a contractor that, you know, has relevant work before your committee, accepting the gift probably just doesn't look good. Next slide. Well, that's it. Just summary. Remember, no conflicting financial interests, even just avoiding the appearance of something just looking bad. You should probably stay away from it. Recuse yourself when there is a conflict, and always, always seek ethics advice. Subject to any questions, that's your annual ethics briefing. Are there any questions?
This is Kelly. I do want to point out that if anybody does have questions for Melinda and they're of the personal nature, you're welcome to contact Melinda or myself, and we can get those answers for you, because I know that a lot of this is definitely personal information.
Yeah.
So if you have anything of that nature, we can take it offline.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. And I do just want to mention in closing that I am required to account to the Office of Government Ethics that all SGEs on this committee receive a briefing. So if you could send me or Kelly an email confirming your attendance, that would be very much appreciated. All right. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
This is David, slide 13, it says misuse of position, do not use or disclose non-public information. If there is non-public information that is given to the EMAB, and I don't know of an example yet in the time I've served, does EM identify it as non-public information?
Yes, we do.
So we presume that everything is public unless otherwise told?
Absolutely. We will let you know if something is being given to you that's not approved for public release. We will let you know. And it should be properly labeled on the document itself.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your meeting. Bye.
Thank you, Melinda. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, bye.
Before we jump into board business and I turn this over to Amy, I neglected to give Alyssa time to say hello and introduce herself.
That's
which
okay.
is
Most of you know
absolutely
me.
Crazy. She's my right hand.
Most of you know me, Alyssa Harris, EMAB Federal Coordinator at headquarters. But I've talked to all of you before, so it's okay.
And we have had a couple of members sign on since we did introductions in the beginning. If you have not already introduced yourself, if you could please do that now.
Kim Kerfoot, University of Michigan Health Physics Professor.
Thanks, Kim.
This is Elliot Laws. I'm an attorney with Crowell and Mooring in Washington, D.C. And a Mets fan, as you can see.
Nice to have you here, Elliot. And I do want you to know that I'm not sure when you signed on, but we did announce that you were going to complete your service at the end of this term. And Mr. Ike White thanked you for your service.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Kelly. I was caught up on another call, which is why I was late, but thank you for that.
Perfectly understandable. Y'all are very busy and we understand that. So now we are to our agenda point on board business. Amy, as our vice chair, since our chair is unavailable, would you like to take it on? You're on mute, Amy.
I want to welcome everybody. And we just had, I think in my term on EMAB, we've had one in-person meeting, and that was in December of 2019 in Washington. And we were finishing up a charge that dealt with managing risk and some really interesting topics that I hope we might want to go back. I said, we might want to go back and visit some of the 2014 information about recommendations on research and development. And I think it would be really helpful. I know it would for me and probably for everybody to maybe get a little sense for some of the recommendations that EMAB has made over the last few years, just to have a feel for what our role is and how we conduct our business and our work. And as Kelly said, Shelley Wilson had a conflict today, so she wasn't able to be here. But one of the things that we talked about last week, we had a call and wanted to just talk for a few minutes about the charge that Ike has set out before us. And I think everybody, before we joined the call, received an email from Melissa that had the write-up, the agenda, and also the two charges that Ike discussed. And I wanted to kind of just talk for a couple minutes about an approach or how you would like to approach conducting this work. And I think the question of our time frame, and Ike indicated he thought it would be kind of up to us to get a sense for how long we thought it might take. But Kelly, on our call earlier, you had indicated that our next meeting might be winter timeframe. So maybe another 6 months or so before we would, as a full board, get back together as one point of reference. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't form subcommittees and we can get together on a scheduled basis. So in looking at the two charges that we have here, we really have a lot of breadth and depth in a number of areas of expertise. And I really enjoyed reading all the bios of the members and how much expertise we really have. And so one of the things that we could do is just not necessarily take the time today, but maybe talk about if there's any questions about the overall approach. But maybe each member could take a look and read the charges and get back to Kelly, Alyssa, myself, Shelley, and give an idea of which area that you are interested in. I know on the previous charge that a couple of years ago, we had a couple different committees, but then we had subcommittees where the work was broken out even a little bit further. So it wasn't such a daunting task for 6 people to say, oh my gosh, I have to answer all these questions or deal with all these questions. So, one approach could be, as an example, Jim Rispoli, he talked quite a bit about how the programs that they had in effect, how the intern program and mentoring, are such a benefit. And I think that was reinforced by our federal employees on the call. So, one approach might be have a, committee chair to take a look at the recruitment and retention, and then break up, the 4 different questions. Or it doesn't mean that we're limited to those 4, but those are just some guiding questions that Ike and the EM are interested in. And then the same with the hybrid work environment. You may have different experiences. I know my husband's a professor at the University of Tennessee, and he taught his first hybrid, online classes in his career during the pandemic. And it's been, it was quite an experience for him. And, some people are going to have more interest and more expertise in that area. One thing that I did want to ask our Kelly and Alyssa, our federal folks, is I think it would, might be really helpful for us to know, what are the current federal policies with respect to hybrid work? Is there, I assume there's overall federal regulations, but then EM has their own set of rules and responsibilities. So I think it would be helpful for us to have those as kind of a baseline for how we approach the tasks. And I guess the other thing that I would mention before I open it up for discussion is that so much of the environmental management work, it relies on hands-on work. We have to have the professional project managers. Obviously, they're enormous tasks. The contract managers, the HR professionals, and I think that's even mentioned here. How do you look at the non-STEM positions? And those are extraordinarily important for the success of the program. But the other thing that I had some personal professional work experience with here not too long ago is trying to, think about the work that EM does at the sites. And it's not just EM that we rely on. We have to rely on the Environmental Protection Agency. We have to rely on our state regulators to be able to provide timely workflow, and their situations may be different in the case that I discovered. So we're kind of going through a major shift now. I think it's coming out of the pandemic. The recruitment and retention, I think, is something we've been talking about for my whole career involving EM, is how do we work on getting the best and the brightest interested in working on this program to make it successful. And now we're looking at, the competing programs, including a lot of discussion about new nuclear development and climate, clean energy, and some of those questions. But the hybrid work environment, that's going to be evolving for a while. And I know the headline in the Nashville newspaper was that Amazon had invested just tens of millions of dollars in a big office building in the main area of downtown Nashville, and they're totally gutting the workspace now. They haven't even opened it, and they're rethinking how they're going to approach their work because of the hybrid work environment. So things are changing, trying to keep the program on track and investing where we need to invest resources. So those are just some preliminary thoughts about how we might move forward, and would like to get your input or suggestions on what you would like to see or how you would like to approach the tasks.
Mary, can I ask you to weigh in here on what is available that we can share in terms of, Amy had mentioned about the existing policies. Do you have a suggestion for what we can provide and give the team an idea of, what's available?
Yeah, as you all know, that the policies have been changing over the last 2.5 years. There is a White House task force that has been very focused on the response to COVID. That's kind of the broad overarching executive guidance, but really so much is delegated to the departments and agencies to execute as the secretary or administrator sees fit. And then within DOE, our secretary has delegated down to the component heads like Ike White to determine what works for EM. And like Amy pointed out, so much of what we do is in the field, hands-on. I mean, we have people that have been working all the way through the pandemic because they had to, because of the type of work we do. But then we have other positions. We have, we're doing some pilots on remote work and hybrid work environment. So really, I think things are, my perspective is that things are pretty wide open. I could certainly share any current policies, but they are changing and I wouldn't want to restrict you. I think that now is the time to be innovative and give us some recommendations that will not only attract a good workforce and quite frankly, a younger workforce and retain them, because that's just, we're having such a hard time. We do have intern programs. We get these incredible interns that come in through our MSIPP program. We just can't hang on to them. So, and I don't know, I'm kind of looking at all of us on that call. I see a lot of baby boomers here. So we do need perspective of the younger workforce and what they're looking for, and because it's competitive. So we gotta get these people, we gotta train them, we gotta keep them. And we have to convince our own hiring managers that junior hires are worth the investment when they're struggling with meeting very concrete quantitative milestones. So there's so much you could help us with, and I really don't want to limit your recommendations, if that's okay.
I think tied into that, we mentioned it earlier, is also the retention of existing. We need to support the retention of existing to stabilize the pipeline of the future. So that's also got to be a part of what we're looking at. Amy, I definitely like the idea of breaking into 2 groups. I don't think we want to go much further and then let each of the groups meet and then decide whether it needs to be broken up further. The 1920 line of inquiry we had was 6 items with multiple levels of depth. So I think that that's why we needed to get a little bit more specific there, but maybe just let us start with the 2 groups and then let the groups meet and then figure out what we want to formulate or how we want to approach it. Because each of these topics are a little bit different. And that's, I also think we need to blend something more in here about justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. And I also think we need to definitely blend in, again, to your point about trades. So you got to start at middle school. That's just the bottom line. And they want flexibility, to answer your question. They don't want, they want the younger generation, everything we're hearing is they definitely want flexibility, life.
I agree with Diane about the 2 groups. I think the 2 questions lend to that as well. Or the 2 areas, I should say.
Michael, I see your hand up. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I also agree with the 2-group approach initially. I do have an informational question maybe someone could answer. My whole government experience was with EPA, and there, as managers, we had to work with federal unions who had responsibility for negotiating conditions of employment, which things like remote workplace and stuff like that would fall in that category. So there was a lot of give and take, and a lot of what we could or couldn't do was conditioned by the agreements that were made with the union. Is that similar in DOE?
Yes, Mike. We have unions. We have unions, not at every single one of our 16 sites, but at a lot of them, and definitely at headquarters. I would say that our unions generally are favoring a more flexible approach. We have a great working relationship with them right now. It's really, really positive, and they've been helpful to us. But we do have to work with the unions, and it's more complicated because it's not all the same union and it's not all the same kind of work.
Thank you.
Celeste has her hand up.
Yes, I would just like to say I do support that idea of breaking us into groups. 2 groups is fine. I have been teaching online. Somebody previously mentioned about their husband teaching online. I've been doing that for over 14 years now. So I'm happy to, any committee that you feel is appropriate, but that's, my background. Okay. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other comments or questions?
This is Angela. I will add just a comment and to build upon what Mary had said. You guys had talked a little bit about what does DOE have in a framework, as far as what we've put out there yet. And Mary's right. Getting the benefit of what you guys have to offer with the most open framework would be great. It is really an open field right now. So far, the way that we do business, we start with sort of the government perspective, which gets trickled down from the White House. COVID's been different a bit because of so much of the regional and state enforcement from a health perspective. So we kind of went down that launch pad with the ramp down and the ramp up in COVID. And so now, even with the retention of the employees and what we're seeing right now, that is seen to be kind of regionalized. Our sister organization, NNSA, has gone out with a generalized compensation increase plan across the board, just to take care of salaries, and then subsequently come back and said, well, wait a second, that may not be working exactly the way we thought. We probably need to look at more retention and variable pay. Maybe that'll help as well. EM, just for your edification, is looking at it across the board, and that probably one fell swoop is not really the right answer, because we're seeing differences in each of the regions, differences at the sites, different drivers. So look, we're still sort of operating from a regionalized, localized perspective. So I just want to provide that kind of feedback.
Nicole, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I would like to follow up on maybe something that I think it was Diane said about justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and wrapping that in. I noticed that in the charge, there's mention of DEI in both like the first and the second categories. So I wonder if if we go with 2 groups, if there are a couple people who might overlap, and that might be their specific focus, or kind of a liaise between the 2 groups, since it is 2 DEI type of issues. Just a thought.
Definitely want to make sure we get a copy and have clarity of the updated DOE diversity inclusion goals. That's helpful.
Do you have more questions or comments?
Hey, Amy, I know you're not looking for people now, but since I'm thinking of it, the first charge I have to stay away from, just because one of my clients is N3B, and Ike mentioned them as a positive example. So I'm going to stay away from that one, but include me in the second one.
Thank you for that, David. Do you want to, today's Monday, do you want, Kelly, would it be helpful if we could have people think about it and get back to us within a week about either by Friday or, maybe next week? I think I don't know when Shelley's coming back, but to just express your interest in whether or not you would be willing to maybe chair one of the committees. the level of work. Like I said, I just have the one reference point where we had a series of scheduled committee meetings and had an hour conversation and then report, kind of taking assignments and volunteering and coming back. And in between those committee meetings, we would interact with each other as needed. And I thought it was really good. And I really liked having that kind of discussion, which I think is really important. And that was really before we even got into all the Zoom meetings, really, right before the pandemic. So does that sound reasonable, as folks can think about what their interest lies? And I like Nicole's idea of maybe trying to have some interface on a couple of the diversity inclusion issues, so that we're not duplicating really effort, but getting in the information that DOE currently has. So does that work? And Kelly, maybe with a goal that we would try to have some preliminary, I don't know if I would call them findings, but maybe by the end of the calendar year, a report back, a status report, and see how far along we are able to get.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. And if, while you're sending your emails regarding which committee you're interested in, and if you're interested in serving as a chair, if you could also include if there's some specific information that you already know you want from us, that would be helpful to have that so we can start gathering that and have it ready in time for your first subcommittee meeting.
Kelly, can I mention something also? The end of the calendar year is a great time frame because our remote work in headquarters was extended through the end of the calendar year. So Ike will be looking to make some decisions, at least on headquarters, during that time frame. And anything you guys need from my group, we're happy to provide you. Any public information. There's a lot of it. I don't want to overwhelm you, but we can get anything for you.
That would be great.
I just want to say this was a great meeting. Count me in for number one, but I cannot chair. So I'm cutting that out right up front. But I'm really excited that we have something, although it's ground we have plowed before many times on personnel and retention, that it might be a benefit of COVID and remote that we might be able to put something in that'll last a little while. So I'm really excited. I wanted to thank the EM team people for sticking with us.
Great.
Kelly and Amy, this is Brent. Hey, since I'm the new kid on the block and I rely so heavily on the intelligence of our local Hanford team, wherever Diane decides to travel in the number one or number two, put me on her coattails so she can mentor the old man along the way.
I already submitted my email. Will be on number one, Mayor.
Okay, and just put my name on it too, if you would, please. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Brian.
And I won't do other duties as described, as I get in trouble for that.
Yes, and on this board you will.
Kelly, is there any other business you or Alyssa think we need to take up or open it up?
I think one of the things that would be beneficial if we are looking for, a draft recommendation or some guidance going forward in the winter timeframe is if you could start looking at your calendars and let us know, December or January, if one of those months is better than the other. And let us know if you prefer to continue to do this online, or if the COVID protocols allow, would you like to meet in person next time? Or we could do a hybrid meeting. So if you have any thoughts on what you would prefer, we would appreciate that insight. That helps us schedule these meetings and make sure that they're convenient for you, because we we understand that you're volunteers and we greatly appreciate your time and your expertise. And so we want to make this as easy as it can be for you, because you are doing such a great service for our program, and we truly appreciate all of the time and effort that you put in.
Well, how about if we just come see you in Las Vegas in January?
That works. That works. January is pretty nice. It gets a little cold, but it's still going to be warmer than where most of you are from.
Amen.
And we could do a tour of the Nevada National Security Site. So there's things to do here, work related.
Yeah. I love doing Zoom, but there's just no replacing being able to sit in the same room and talk and have a cup of coffee and be able to get to know folks.
That's in-person human contact really cannot be replicated completely. Jim, I see your hand up.
Yes, Kelly, thank you. You know, looking at the charges that were sent out and just hearing the discussion about the challenge of how do we bring people back to the workforce and workspace, they're in the workforce already. How do we make them enthusiastic about coming back to the office, and what is the new model? I would just offer that the Department of Energy is a member of the Federal Facilities Council at the National Academies in Washington. And one of their standing committees is on human resources. And this is a major topic. 25 agencies are members, including DOE. And they discuss this topic currently. It's an ongoing thing. I happen to know because I'm chair of the overall FFC. So I would say that, you know, if this is something important to DOE headquarters, that the HR people should look at, or I can help them to put in contact with the head of that subcommittee, the standing subcommittee on human resources in the Federal Facilities Council, because DOE is not alone in going through this. And, you know, the EMAB could certainly have a shot at it, but here you have as many as probably right now, there are probably 15 agencies represented on that standing committee that could dialogue with DOE's HR people. And I think it might be actually a better place for DOE to get that kind of input than from the EMAB. That's just a thought I'm having. I mean, you know, certainly other federal agencies are struggling with exactly the same issue right now.
Hey, Jim, if there's any online resources, can you send that link out to us?
Yeah, I can send you an email and put you in contact with the staff person at National Academies. And, you know, the standing subcommittees generally meet typically like every other month virtually. They have not yet gotten back to in person, nor has the overall FFC. I have not been up there to chair a meeting since March of 2 years ago. But it's so easy to attend these meetings. And what I could do, David, if I think, Kelly, if you could send me David's email information, I can introduce you to the paid staffer there and tell him of your interest in that HR standing subcommittee. And they discuss, you know, the GSA is very heavily engaged in this because keep in mind, they're the ones who negotiate all the leases for federal agencies all over the country. So this is a really hot topic right now. What is going to happen? You know, how much the different agencies want to encourage people to come back to the office. And if so, how often? What is the new office space arrangement? All those things. So I'd be happy to do that, David, once Kelly sends me your contact info.
I'd like it too, Jim, please.
Okay, anybody who does, just Kelly, just send me their info. I guess that was Mary, right? Mary Kruger. I'd be happy to introduce you. His name is Cameron Oskvig, the staffer at National Academies. And I would be happy to introduce you to him by email so that you could look at, you know, getting on the schedule for the upcoming meetings and things like that.
Great. That's really helpful, Jim. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or input? We are getting close in time to where we need to do our public comment period, but we did not receive any public comment prior to the meeting. Alyssa, did anything come in while we were meeting? No? Okay. So we can continue to discuss any topic you would like to discuss, or I could turn it back over to Amy as our leader and
I just want to say, so is this Elliot's last meeting? Is he, Elliot, is this your last meeting? You may be off.
So
well-
his term expires at the end of September.
Okay.
And so I don't know if he is interested in participating in the committees up until then, or what his schedule allows.
Okay. We'll do that. But I guess I just want to say thank you again to everybody. And it's been pointed out several times that this really is public service, and none of us are getting paid, and we're all doing it in addition to everything else that we have going on. But these two charges are really just so relevant to everything, you know, that we're doing. I know our organization is in the middle of trying to deal with the recruitment issues and looking at what are some of the values that young people in particular have that we may not be thinking about, and are doing a survey of our employees to try to flesh some of that out. So, you know, this is important work, and we all know that we want environmental management program to succeed. And I just want to say thank you to Kelly and Alyssa and all the federal folks on the phone for taking your time today and helping us have our organizational meeting. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. And I know Shelley feels the same way. And we've got a great group. And I think these are really going to be important reports that we can provide some feedback at that will make a difference to the organization. So thank you all for taking the time today. And I look forward to hearing who's interested in which committee so that we can move forward with setting up some subcommittees and move ahead.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you all for your time. If you have any questions or need anything from us, please let me know. And as a reminder, if you have ethics questions for Melinda, please send those in and we'll make sure to answer your questions. And thank you again for all of your time. We do appreciate it.
Thanks.
Ellie, quick question. If Mary and David feel like there's a good information from this National Academies and Federal Facilities, maybe we could have another online meeting just to get a briefing from that group so we can all kind of hear what's happening in that space. It might be helpful for all of us. I'm just putting that out there as an option. Thank you. And everyone.
Hey, Alyssa, it's Elliot. I got disconnected at the weirdest time. You were just asking me a question.
I was just asking if this was going to be your last meeting, and Kelly said that your term runs through September. And I just wanted
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for your service. I'm sorry that you're not going to be continuing, but you've
well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's been a tremendous honor and privilege to reconnect with people and meet some new people. I am sorry that some of my old colleagues are joining. I worked with Mike Shapiro for quite a few years at the agency. We're in the same office, and he is going to be a tremendous addition to EMAB. But it seems like we all weathered a really difficult time. We did a lot of good work, and I wish you all the best as you go forward.
Thank you, Elliot. You will be missed.
Yeah.
All right, everybody have a wonderful afternoon and stay safe.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank
Take
you.
care all.